Hey guys, just want to make a quick announcement that this video is brought to you by Squarespace once again. It's one of the best platforms for creating online stores and websites, so stay tuned to find out more later in the video. Back when I released my episode on Hypercarries, a comment that was heavily upvoted was a suggestion for me to cover a subgroup related to that by comparing and contrasting the two. I thought it would be a decent idea as I bring up the topic a lot myself. So today, we're going to be talking about the opposite end of the carry spectrum, anti-carries. Not many people think about that term since it's not really thrown around much, mostly because the champions that make up the anti-carry group are mistaken for regular carries, or just regular champions in general. The discussion topic I had in mind for this one was whether or not they might actually be the best classic carrying games compared to Hypercarries, who I argued were the worst, so I'm looking forward to this one. First things first, we have to establish what even is an anti-carry. It depends from person to person, but my definition is a champion whose main way of carrying games is by preventing the enemy from doing so, making it really hard for them to execute their strategy or win condition, and it can be done through zoning, lockdown, or denial. I don't know how many of you know about the shield and spear paradox, where the question poses what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object, like what happens if a spear that can pierce through anything tries to break through an impenetrable shield. That's what an anti-carry is. Carries are, as the name implies, champions who can carry games, and anti-carries are champions who prevent games from being carryable, if that makes sense. Now, I understand many of you might think tanks are anti-carries since they can lock down marksmen, or enchanters are anti-carries since they stop assassins, but not exactly. The key differences between an anti-carry and those types of champions, with hard CC or zoning, goes as follows. They're able to be just as dangerous as actual carries, but unlike carries who apply their combat pressure through straightforward methods like attacking their target head-on, anti-carries can only inflict their pressure on enemies who either let themselves get hit or don't pay attention to what the anti-carry is doing or where they are. In other words, they have the potential to dish out massive amounts of damage over the course of a game through bait and punishment, or by taking advantage of other players' ignorance and or arrogance, which, as you know, there's no shortage of stupidity in solo queue. Something to make note of is that anti-carries have damage that can sometimes far exceed anyone else's, but they might struggle to be lethal since their damage can be slow or strike only one target, whereas carries are usually able to hit multiple people very quickly. Their pressure is also primarily counter-engage. Anti-carries may not always have the ability to go into fights of their own accord, which separates them from assassins or vanguards who usually strike first. Typically, they function best when the enemy team makes the first move. Most importantly, just like Hypercarries, anti-carries can be notoriously inconsistent. Sometimes they'll be completely useless, other times they can solo 1v9 the game. However, because many of them have significantly lower pick rates, those who do play them a lot can be extremely proficient at them. When you see someone with like 1,000 games on Yasuo, they likely have a 50% win rate and are the most coin flippy players in existence. But Shaco mains or Quinn mains, they likely have a 60% plus win rate on their champion, so you can ironically have a better chance at winning with one of them on your team versus an actual Hypercarry. Technically speaking, the most common way to shut down champions is with hard crowd control like stuns and knockups, and while a good majority of anti-carries have no shortage of lockdown, they also come with unique tools that only they have in some cases. Like their counterparts, everyone has their own list of champions that would be considered anti-carries, but here's one I think most people will agree with. Bard, Cho'Gath, Fiddlesticks, Galio, Heimerdinger, Lissandra, Malzahar, Mordekaiser, Nocturne, Pantheon, Poppy, Quinn, Rammus, Renekton, Shaco, more specifically AP Shaco, Singed, Teemo, Veigar, Vi, and Zillion. As you can see, anti-carries come from all walks of life. They can be mages, assassins, divers, marksmen, tanks, early game lane bullies to scaling late game monsters. While some of these champions you might look at and go, how are these anti-carries? They're just regular carries. Notice how they all have one or more ways to majorly screw over or deny the enemy team, not so much enhance or bolster their own. We can go over a few of them to give you an idea of what I mean. So how about Nocturne, Mordekaiser, Poppy, and Shaco? So Nocturne's paranoia completely darkens the map, making it very difficult for the enemy team to protect his target unless they're already sitting right on top of them. This makes it dangerously risky for carries to wander around the map unguarded. Also, his spell shield can block the first instance of self-peel such as a Vein Condemn or a Yasuo Tornado, making it even harder for them to stop his assault. Mordekaiser's basic abilities are very standard. He has damage, he has a pull, and a shield which turns into a heal. But his ultimate Death Realm is one of the most threatening abilities in the game. He can zap away priority targets not only to stop them from team fighting, but also force them into arguably the worst situation they want to be in, staring down one of the most terrifying juggernauts in the game with no backup. Mordekaiser can ult the jungler to prevent them from stealing Baron or Dragon. He can ult the Ezreal who no longer has Yuumi to juice him up. In all honesty, his ultimate is the most anti-carry ability in the entire game. Poppy's whole kit screams anti-carry. Her steadfast presence creates a zoning field that outright punishes you for dashing, and as you know, a lot of hypercarries have dashes. Heroic Charge forces enemies to be very careful about their position relative to her, which psychologically can deter their movements, and Keeper's Verdict can be used to separate tanks and supports from carries. As for Shaco, particularly AP Shaco, his Jackboxes and Clone. We don't need to go any further. These are by far the most annoying traps in the entire game. I'd rather step on 3 Teemo mushrooms than 1 Shaco box, I swear to god. Mind you, he doesn't have the same one-shot kill power you would see on perhaps a Katarina, but he's really damn good at causing chaos during a team fight and throwing the enemy team off their game. By the way, in case you didn't know, Shaco is an anagram of chaos. Essentially, anti-carries serve best as counterpicks. You know, you pick Galio mid into melee assassins, or you pick Renekton whenever enemy top locks in Riven, Yasuo, or Lee Sin. You can pick Malzahar when you feel like ruining the enemy assassin's day, or you pick Teemo when you want to watch the world burn. Hopefully that does a good job explaining what an anti-carry is. Anyway, in my Hypercarries video, I talked a lot about how they're ironically the worst group of champions at consistently carrying games. What's interesting is that anti-carries may actually be far better than hypercarries at their job. I came up with a few reasons as to why that is the case. Of course, given the wide diversity of the group, each reason may not apply to all of them, but at least a large amount. Let's start with their most impactful quality, their insane psychological pressure. Most of the time, even the fastest killers like assassins or divers have visible engage ranges. 9 times out of 10, you'll see the champion coming straight towards you, which even if it's only for a second, gives you time to mentally psych yourself up for their attack. Anti-carry champions can usually get close to you very quickly without you being able to react. Fiddlesticks is one such example. He's extremely scary because he can jump out from over the wall, instantly fear and silence you while bursting your entire team down 100 to 0. The mere possibility of getting ambushed by Fiddlesticks is enough to make teams worried about advancing without proper vision control. Nocturne and Pantheon for the same reasons. Both are basically living embodiments of f*** you to enemy carries with their point-and-click hard CC and defensive tools. Almost every anti-carry is dangerous both when you can and can't see them. Cho'Gath, Lissandra, Malzahar, Mordekaiser, Renekton, and Singed comprise the first group, where they can straight up scare you off with the threat of making a beeline towards you. Nocturne, Bard, Galio, Pantheon, Quinn, Rammus, Shaco, and Teemo would comprise the other group. You have very little way of knowing if they're nearby because they can enter the fight from far away or attack from very far away. You have to be absolutely certain you know where their location is, otherwise they might as well be standing right next to you. Anti-carries are so effective at shutting down enemy carries that their mere presence can be enough to discourage them from playing aggressively or confidently. Additionally, they don't need to strike first, which means they don't have to deal with the hardest part of a fight, knowing when to go in. If the enemy team engages first, you can then react accordingly, which means all you have to do is wait for that moment. Even though League of Legends is a game that rewards proactivity, that's only if it is executed methodically and carefully. So many players are too impatient to wait for a proper opening that they just rush in on the first target they see, making it that much easier for anti-carries to do their job because they thrive on waiting for enemies to fall into their trap before wiping them all out. I find it really funny whenever a person complains that right as their Leona engages, the enemy Rammus just happens to be there. That's usually because he was waiting for you to be dumb enough to go in so he can bowling ball himself right into your Caitlyn and then enemy double kill. There are some anti-carries who have abilities specifically designed for counter-engage. Galio and Zilean have ultimates that can only be used defensively. When the entire enemy team dogpiles on a single teammate, all you have to do is press a button and you automatically ruin their plan. In games with turn-based systems like Pokemon, it's always I go, then you go, then I go, then you go. And while there's no concrete turn order in games like League of Legends, there still is a sequence of actions that take place due to the very nature of how PvP games work. Let me bring a Smash Bros as a quick example. Even though you can attack as many times as you want without your opponent doing anything, there is a period of delay in between each action, during which your opponent can then initiate an action to attack you. That's why, in high levels of play, both players usually try to wait for or bait their opponent into attacking first because when you attack, you have to lower your guard, making you vulnerable to attack yourself. This happens in League of Legends too. When Zed rushes in to engage on the enemy AD carry, there is a window, no matter how small, for that AD carry to respond, such as the delay it takes for Zed's deathmark animation to complete. In fact, I'd argue it's even more so in League of Legends than it is in fighting games because attacks don't cause hit stun unless it's hard crowd control, so you can still act while taking damage. champions like Renekton love being engaged on because he can usually survive any champion's first strike before going max fury and landing a triple empowered EQW combo. Engaging on a Mordekaiser saves him the trouble of having to catch up to you after pressing his ult since you're standing right on top of him. Teemo is likely surrounded by a billion mushrooms and his blinding dart makes your basic attacks useless. Unlike most Hypercarries who usually need to be the aggressor, Anticarries can choose to simply wait for their opponents to engage carelessly before punishing them. That's not to say these guys don't have the ability to go first. In fact, they usually still do. But having that option makes them all the more flexible. Shaco in particular is nasty at both. You can attack him first because he has his Q blink stealth and ultimate on-target ability, but he can also stealth his way into your lane for easy ganks and control wards do not reveal invisibility. Moving on. Anticarries can usually keep to themselves and don't rely on ally and enemy team compositions or resource funneling to perform well, whereas Hypercarries are very dependent on what the enemy team comp is. Most of the time, Malzahar, Lissandra, Galio, Fiddlesticks, Renekton, Poppy and such can fit comfortably into any lineup, and outside of edge cases they do decently well against any combination of enemy champions. Master Yi on the other hand can be invalidated effortlessly against the right enemy team composition or the wrong ally team composition. I don't necessarily mean to imply that anti-carries have no counterpicks. There are plenty of matchups that will make a Mordekaiser want to ult himself forever, but someone like Heimerdinger, do you think he legitimately cares who is on his team or the enemy team? Hell no. As I mentioned before, anti-carries shut down carries through zoning, lockdown, and or denial. Since there will always be at least one carry on the enemy team, there will always be a place for someone to shut down that carry, and these guys are pros at doing that. All the same, these champions are largely situational and there isn't a Swiss Army knife for when in doubt. Each anti-carry is tailored to stop a specific class or group of champions. Rammus is designed to shut down heavy auto attackers like Marksman, but he can struggle against battle mages or juggernauts. Poppy is designed to shut down high mobility classes like divers and assassins, but her neutral game is awful due to her short range, so against long range attackers, she's gonna struggle. Nocturne is one of the best counters to mages and marksmen, but he sucks against tanks or enemy comps with large amounts of lockdown. Each one can cover a wide number of champions, but no single champion can cover everybody. Well, maybe Shaco. Lastly, the average player knows how to fight carries, but they don't always know how to fight anti-carries. Since most of them have really strange playstyles, it's unclear as to what they're capable of, especially to those who don't routinely play them. That adds to an anti-carry's advantage as information is half of the battle. 90% of Shaco's pressure comes from people straight up having absolutely no idea how to stop him. They don't understand the thought process of Shaco players because Shaco plays in such a weird way. And through his unconventional playstyles, he can blindside you over and over again. You have to treat AD Shaco completely different from AP Shaco, and both are dangerous in their own right. It's common knowledge that most of the time, the best way to figure out how to beat a champion is to play that champion yourself. Although, whether that practice is true may be up for debate because I've seen a bunch of Riven mains get their one trick stolen from them and they have absolutely no idea how to stop her. Singed can feel super annoying because no one knows how to deal with a champion who unironically doesn't care about dying. He's the only champion in the game who proxy farms. His game plan in teamfights is to run around making a giant mess. Are you supposed to focus him? That's exactly what he wants. So then are you supposed to ignore him? Then he gasses you to death. Anti-carries are strong simply because the community as a whole doesn't have a firm grasp on what countermeasures they should employ to stop them, and they never will. Now, for the better part of the video, I compared anti-carries with hypercarries and their stark contrast in playstyle and properties, but there is one thing they have in common. People hate them. Few champions elicit more vitriol out of the League community than Teemo, Shaco, Malzahar, Quinn, Singed, etc. Whether or not that's a good or bad thing is entirely up to you. By and large though, they're just as disliked if not more than the Vaynes, Yones, Viegos because they basically play the game by making you not play the game. In game design standards, that's not the most healthy gameplay. It's akin to, for example, strategies in Pokemon where you build a stall team, where you have a whole bunch of tanks and high sustain Pokemon that just use Toxic and Protect and Recover and Slack off and things like that. It's viable, just not the most honorable way to go about things. Anyway, you can be the most mechanically skilled AD carry on the planet and be forced to waste 1300 gold just because a bowling ball runs up to you and lands its point and click ability, or Malzahar just stares at you for 2 seconds. Heaven knows I hate Quinn with a white-hot passion. Regardless of what champion I play, I hate her. I hate Shaco, I hate Malzahar, I hate so many of these champions myself. But I do acknowledge the role they play in balancing League of Legends to a sense, and I appreciate that they're in the game. You can sign as many petitions trying to remove Shaco as you want, but everyone, at least once, has experienced the sheer hilarity of watching their Shaco teammate literally 1v9 games by being the most annoying piece of shit on the entire planet. On the enemy team, a good anti-carry is a living nightmare, but on your team, almost virtually a free win. These guys have only one job, and they do that job really well. Now before we wrap up the video, I want to talk about today's sponsor, Squarespace. If you're trying to start a business, blog, online store, or website of any sort, Squarespace is an all-in-one platform that lets you easily make a professional and polished first impression. They have some of the best user interface and usability I've seen from a website maker, and they simplify the website making process so you can upload images, videos, add web pages, and even member areas to allow exclusivity. Even if you have zero knowledge about designing websites, the platform offers a wide array of templates so you can design websites in any way you want, on top of being able to customize the layout of each page to suit your needs. Also, for your convenience, they do sell domains so you can buy one to link to your page as opposed to going to another place. If you're thinking about starting a business, a club, an organization, or online presence, I highly recommend Squarespace. They're one of the big names in the website building world, and to help you get started, check the link out on screen or click the link in the video description to get a free 2-week trial and 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. With that said, if you enjoyed the video, I'd appreciate it if you gave it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to see more content like this. Consider following me on my socials and joining me on my Discord server if you'd like. Lastly, I have a playlist in the description with tons of other videos for you to binge watch, so go check those out too. For now though, thanks so much for watching, and I'll hopefully see you again soon. Take care.